The regular school board meeting of the Northfield Public Schools. It is Monday, May 8th at 7 p.m. And I think before we get started, I was going to remind board members that the reason that I am chairing and that Director Bailey is sitting in for Dr. Hillman is because both Julie and Dr. Hillman are celebrating a once-in-a-lifetime moment with their children being confirmed tonight. So this is, I think, Julie's first and only miss ever for school board. So, you know, when it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, that we want to support that. So that's why you're seeing us. But I wanted to talk about, Dr. Hillman had mentioned to me we would have some items in the table file. So, Director Bailey, are there just a few things?
There are just a few things. Excuse me. There are just a few things in the table file. One was just a slight correction to the note that was in the board packet regarding the community services budget. It just gives updated revenue expenses, and then the rest are personnel items.
Great.
No, there's some other behind.
Sorry about that.
Sure. There's the
Youth council
Oh.
and the gift agreement.
Thank you. The youth council and the gift agreement are also in there.
Great. If there's no objection, we will add these to the agenda as we move forward. All right. Now we are on to public comment. This is an opportunity for residents of the Northfield School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who is going to wish to address the board? No, we have no one for public comment. So with that, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packets the minutes from the last school board meeting, which was April 24th. Motion to approve the minutes by Jeff, and a second by Noel. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Announcements and recognition.
So I have two announcements this evening. The first is that the Greenville Park Community School partnered with Alina Clinics to host a Free Bikes for Kids event this past Saturday. 155 gently used bikes were distributed to local children and youth ages 3 through high school. The bikes distributed were collected by Alina Clinic and refurbished by a bike repair program. And a big thank you to the volunteers from Greenville Park and the community that were part of this fabulous event. And then yesterday, Dr. Hillman and Julie Pritchard attended the Minnesota Teacher of the Year banquet in Bloomington. Unfortunately, Northfield High School social studies teacher Sarah Swan McDonald was not selected as Teacher of the Year, but we are so proud of her and all that she accomplished with students to be one of the 11 teachers across the state that was named as a finalist. Mounds Wisconka language arts teacher Corey Bullman was selected as the 2017 Minnesota Teacher of the Year. And those are all the announcements I have for this evening.
Board members, any other announcements or recognition? Margaret?
I want to mention that I attended the mock crash held last Friday at the high school, and Kevin Dahl was in attendance. It was impactful and very well done and very involved. It involves a lot of coordination between staff and local EMS services, and I think it makes a huge difference to these kids. I think some of the kids do walk away and think, and hoping that the next time they get in a car, it will occur to them. So I would like to say thank you to all the EMS, and I believe there's an electrical company that puts together the whole sound. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but puts together the sound for the entire event. And it was pretty dramatic and pretty important. Pardon me?
I think it's Fetty.
Fetty, that's it. Fetty Electric out of Faribault. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
Great. Any other announcements or recognition?
I have one.
Okay.
Sorry I'm late. I was at my daughter's lacrosse game in Faribault, so it was an official sanctioned event. But it just went a little later than I thought. I knew it'd be close. I don't know what was said, so I just arrived, but I wanted to mention that I was recently involved with the after prom party.
Great.
And I was sort of tangentially on the committee. They met on board meeting night, so I never actually went to a committee meeting, but I did help at the after prom party. And there were about 50% of the eligible students, juniors and seniors, attended. And it was many organizations donated to it, and it was just a very successful event. And I wanted to thank the many volunteers, the junior parents who were there and put in time and were awake from midnight to 4 a.m. to make this event happen. It's really a wonderful event for our students. So I wanted to say that, and then I had one other announcement.
Okay.
The other, it's sort of a recognition, and this might have been mentioned, but some of you may know that one of our seniors in our high school had some emergency medical, life-threatening situation, and I just wanted to let everyone know that there is a Caring Bridge website for Kale Asada. If anybody's interested in following his progress, his whole story is on there, and the family is very happy to have any emotional support through that website or other means. And they've also set up a GoFundMe site, so if anybody wants to help with medical expenses, because it's been a very, very serious thing that Kale is going through.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements or recognition?
Amy, you might want to move to your,
Oh, I'm not used to sitting there.
Rob's not here with us.
Great. Well, with that, why don't we move on to the first item for discussion reports, which I believe Director Cheryl Hall is here to give us the Special Education 2017 preview.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening and update you on the status of special education in the district and where we see that we are headed. This is really just to inform you. We're not making any decisions this evening, but to inform you of the upcoming changes and some of the challenges that we are facing during this time. So our current reality is that as of December 1, 2016, our federal child count was at 575 students. Right now, if you look at our child count today, because we're months from that date, we're a little over 600 students in special education, identified as needing special education. So that number is up. Over 2 years, we've gone up about 8%. And so that is impacting our needs for staffing, and we've had some increases over last year, and we're looking at it again this year. Every year we are obligated to do what's called a work analysis calculation, and we look at the number of students, we look at the service minutes, direct and indirect, we look at the minutes of service that any child could receive during the school day, and then we look at all the other services besides the direct services. Maybe they have OT, PT related services, those kinds of things on their IEPs. We have to look at that in our calculation. And from that, we look at so we're looking at that number of students, that complexity of need of those students, and then we're looking at what is the caseload limits for those students. So any one teacher, how many students can they serve relatively within that amount of time that they have and the number of students that we have and the space that we have that we're looking at. So we look at that every year. And last year I came to you after we did that calculation, and we were really looking at a significant increase into the number of students and the number of staff that we might need. And so we looked at possibly doing a due process clerical this year as a pilot. You helped support that. To see if that would offset some of the work that the case managers had to do during this school year, to see if that would resolve some of our issues of serving our students. And this year, that really had some mixed results. It provided teachers that additional time during their case management time to be able to focus on that other work that they do. And it also helped them to meet those IEP writing requirements and other requirements that they have. The mixed results is it worked well in some spaces, and it worked well in some of the schools, and it didn't work as well in others. And that was directly related to that we don't have space for these folks. We don't have office space. They need private office space. They need a space where they're close to their special education teachers. And some of our staff were shared between buildings because it was a part-time position. And so it depended on the individual and depended on those circumstances. At Greenville Park, that person had to hop around from place to place during the day even to find a spot to work because it's just too crowded. So that person ended up working at the middle school more, and that just created some communication issues between the teams, so less effective. So we look at that and we say, did it produce the results that we were hoping for? And in some ways, yes, some teachers found it very, very helpful and very useful. Did it increase the number of minutes that they were available to serve their students directly? No, it really didn't. And we were waiting for the second year of the workload analysis calculation to really determine if our calculation was a fairly new calculation that we were using. And we were looking to see if over 2 years that was consistent, that we would need an increase in staff in order to meet the needs of our students. And we really see that over 2 years, it's very consistent that there is a need. And I'll go through why that need is there. So our projections this year, as you heard earlier from me, that our early childhood special education numbers are really going through the roof. We've doubled our numbers, and it's been consistent. And we're looking that next year we are starting our hand-in-hand preschool, integrated preschool, with 7 sections as we did this year. But the integrated or the special education spots in those preschool classrooms will be full when we start in the fall. We won't have any place, if we identify more children during the year, to put them in our integrated preschool. So we've added 15 birth to 2 students this year. We've added 22 3 to 5 students since the beginning of this school year. That's a considerable number of students. We're right on target on what we projected earlier when I said I needed to add staff, and I thank you for that, staff, because it's really helped us to keep up with our due process testing, meeting the needs of those students, and providing the appropriate services to them. So again, anticipate that it will be similar next year, that we're on this trajectory of increasing, and it's not new to, really, it's similar across the state. If you ask others, they're all seeing an increase in this area. And we believe that that is due to our, there is now an online way to refer students. It all goes to one location, and then that information gets sent right back to us in the district where the student resides. So we get that information immediately. We think families like going online, being able to do it that way. You're not waiting for a phone call, you're not leaving a message somewhere and waiting for someone to get back to you. It's an automatic referral through the system. So we think that's helping with increasing that referral system, the referral numbers. We project that we need to add another ECSE instructor for next year, a 0.5 speech language clinician, because we did add that this spring, and we want to continue that next year to have 2.0 at the Early Childhood Center, and 0.25 school psychologists in order to be able to keep up with all of the evaluations that we're doing for adding that many students. That's a lot of evaluations, and they're all initial, because when they come in at early childhood, we're identifying them for the first time usually, unless they're coming from another district. And there's no space. There's no space to add more integrated preschool. There's no space really to add any other services for our children there. So we are looking at some other options, and I'll get to the other options in a little bit. At the elementary level, our existing resource rooms will start the year with an average of 12 students per teacher on their caseload. And our workload analysis would indicate that we really have a maximum capacity of about 14 students, and that's that they have the number of minutes needed to serve those students during the day. That's a little bit lower than what we used to see. We used to be able to serve maybe closer to 18 by the end of the year, but due to the level of needs that we're seeing, we're just seeing even our mild students needing more services, more time during the school day. Both our level 2 and 3, NB stands for neurobiological classroom, that serves our students with autism spectrum disorders, and those classrooms at Sibley, there's 2 classrooms at Sibley that serve our K through 5 students. The more significant, the students with more significant needs do get placed in those programs, we are starting at capacity in the fall. We have a large group of students coming up from preschool into kindergarten, and then just the number of students that are actually moving into the district or non-resident agreements to come to the district to receive services is also impacting us in places like Sibley. So I already spoke to those. Also, our LI program, which is our low incidence program, serving our most severely disabled students, will also be at capacity. We've been low there for a couple of years. We just saw kind of a dip in that number, but now we're back up, and it's going to be near capacity. The programs, the ASD programs, and our LI program, those have specific caseload limits that are in Minnesota rule that we have to follow. So again, at our elementary, level 2, level 3 EBD at Bridgewater Elementary will be over capacity or near over capacity when we start in the fall. Our level 2, level 3 DCD program at Greenville Park, serving our mild moderate students with developmental cognitive disabilities, will also begin this year with 11 students. We can usually go up to about 15 in that group, but it really depends on the needs of the student. We have to adjust based on those needs. And then all of these numbers are impacted by the space we have available to provide the services. The need to create additional capacity to serve level 1 and 2 autism spectrum disorder and emotional behavioral disorder students at Bridgewater, Greenville Park, and Sibley. Because the capacity is met at Sibley in our NB program, and also our level 2, level 3 program at Bridgewater, we need to try to expand the capacity of our other teachers that are licensed in those areas to be able to meet those needs. But we can only do that if we have more space. And many of the spaces that we're using, for example, over at Bridgewater, and I think our facility study this past year pointed out that many of those spaces that we're using were not meant for instructional space. They were meant for other uses. So we have students in those spaces. And caseload limits are limited by that instructional space. So we have some issues. Again, the three special education staff share one classroom at Greenville Park and at Sibley in their what's called their resource room. And last year when we had our program monitoring, we were cited for the way we were serving students at Greenville Park. We had our EBD students served within that resource room, and we were really not able to meet the needs. So we had to make a corrective action this year, and we had to move that to a different space within Greenville Park to correct that citation. We are looking at that happening again at Sibley, and we need to make that correction for next fall as well, because previously we were able to serve those students in that space, but our needs are just changing. The needs of our students are changing. They are more severe, they're having more trouble, and without the appropriate space, it's harder to provide that service. So we were looking at that we would need a 1.0 FTE resource at Sibley. This is because part of that, 0.5 of that was actually covered by our low incidence teacher. We get creative when we need to or when we can be. I spoke to that low incidence classroom being lower in numbers this past year, over the last 2 years, and that teacher has actually been helping out our resource room to pick up the extras there. Well, with that at capacity, that room at capacity next year, we won't be able to be that creative and do that. We'll need to have another teacher to help out. We also have some students with significant health issues that are not able to access school or not able to access school on a regular basis, and that teaching time is going to be needed to go out into the community to serve those children. The 0.5 FTE resource at Bridgewater is also needed to help with their numbers and the number of students coming up into kindergarten from preschool, and the same at Greenville Park. We also need to address the special education instructional space issues at all three of these elementary schools. And I've spoken to the point of the separate EBD classroom at Sibley is needed to meet that. And we would like to create more motor room space at Bridgewater to serve those sensory needs of our students that have those needs. All the other schools have a motor space area, and Bridgewater doesn't have the space to be able to do that. Projections for the middle school. The middle school NB neurobiological program that serves autism students will begin the year at maximum capacity as well. There's a large number of fifth grade students entering into the middle school next fall, and many with more complex needs than we've seen in the past. This increase is offset by the large number of eighth grade students moving on to the high school, so we have a balance kind of happening there where we have the FTE that we have at the middle school can actually kind of absorb this, and we have students, or we have staff that are licensed in the areas that we need in order to cover most of those services there. So we're reallocating some FTE there to help cover that. So that's one of those instances where we can be a little creative. So projections for the high school. The number of students in the low incidence program at the high school is decreasing for the foreseeable future. We have a little dip in this age group, and so we were able to decrease from 2 classrooms down to 1 classroom for next fall, but that classroom will be at capacity. So we're kind of sitting on that bubble of if any students move in, that's a little risky, but we believe that's the best way to go at this time. There's a large number of students entering the 9th grade next fall. There are 27 students that are graduating in our senior class that have disabilities in our IEPs. We have 42 incoming 9th graders. That's a big change for them. So we are reallocating that FTE from the low incidence classroom to the resource room in order to cover that, the incoming 9th graders that have more mild disabilities, mild moderate disabilities. So some options that we're considering and things that we might need to do, ECSE at Longfellow School. We could move our special services office and itinerant staff, those are our PT, OT. Some of our birth to 3 staff could possibly move to another space, if we could find another space to move them to. Maybe it would be a leased space. That's not covered by lease levy though. That's an issue for the district. Convert those spaces into ECSE classrooms, and or just we have more staff, we have more teachers, we have more needs for even office space there. We have people in the basement in places that are not real conducive to working or handicap accessible. Purchase early childhood slots in the community preschools. We're already working on that. We're working with our community members. We've done this in the past. Now that we are at capacity in our programs, we are reaching out to our community preschools to contract with them for slots for our students to go there. The drawback for that is that when you have staff traveling, you lose instructional time. And so it's a trade-off for that. We could create separate special ed classrooms as well, and we have done this, and we can meet more student needs there, but it's not in an integrated preschool program, but it would meet their special education needs. At the elementary level, we can try to identify any unused space that can be used for special education. And we all know from our facility study, there isn't any unused space. Some of it's being creative and trying to shift things around, but it's becoming more and more difficult. Move special education classrooms to larger spaces so they can serve more students. That would help offset our caseload issue. That if we could serve more students at one time or in groups, larger groups, we could maybe serve more students with the same number of case managers. But again, we were cited for inadequate space for special education in one area of Greenville Park. That was corrected this year. We can also ask special education staff to accept an overload for those additional hours. They have that case management time. If they have to teach during that time or during their prep time, we could ask them to take that overload, and we have. And I have to say that our special education teachers are exceptional. They will go above and beyond to make sure their students get their needs met before they have their case management time, even now. And unless I ask them or keep on them, say, you have to let me know when that happens, so we know when to inform the school board and inform others that we need additional staff, or we also need to pay the overload. We want to make sure we're staying within that contractual language. So I'm always encourage them to let me know when their schedules get too heavy. Other options at the high school, identify any unused space that could be used for special education. Again, for those larger groups that are coming in, how to do that. They're problem solving, the special ed team is problem solving on that, and I think they have some good ideas coming forward. Excuse me. Move special education classrooms, again, to larger spaces. Create additional handicap accessible bathrooms. We have students coming up from the middle school that have more significant physical needs that need some larger spaces. While we have some handicap accessible bathrooms, they are not actually built to the level that's needed for these specific needs. In order to keep with data privacy for students, I don't want to go into great detail about that, but just know that that is a need that we're looking at. Any questions?
Board members, questions for Cheryl? Margaret?
I have like 5 questions. Can I ask them one at a time?
Sure.
Or should I ask one and then
Why
open it
don't
up?
you ask a couple, and then we can open it up and
Let's
we
do
can
that.
return back to you.
Okay. Why are we seeing such an increase? Is it we're better at identifying, or is it that our enrollment's going up, so naturally the number of children needing special services is going up?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
I think that's really it.
Okay, and my other question is, if we were to pass the elementary school bond and Greenville Park became an early childhood elementary space, would that space then be adequate for these needs?
I believe.
And I'm just asking a guess, right?
From my understanding of the space and what we were looking at the time that we were doing the study, I believe it would be.
Okay,
If I can chime in on, because the hope would be that we would add additional
great.
preschool classrooms, which then would help serve, because the real goal is to have the integrated preschool. So by having those additional preschool
Okay.
classrooms and early childhood family education classes, where we also have some early childhood special needs students, it would allow hand-in-hand preschool to serve more early childhood special ed students.
And I know that that building wouldn't be ready for many years down the road should the bond pass. So I know we need to address
Right.
this now.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay. I'll
Somehow.
stop for a while.
Other board members have questions? Amy?
When you were talking about how there are increased referrals, who is doing the referral? Is that the parents themselves, or is that doctors that they're seeing, or how does that work?
So in early childhood, it's any person that has a concern about a child's development can refer the child. So many times it does come from a parent. It does come from doctors. It might come from child protection. And now there's automatic referrals if there is a child protection case that's open and there's abuse in the home. That's an automatic referral, and we must at least screen, if not evaluate those students. And I would say that the central point of intake now, on the online and phone call into that central point, is really helping people to access that better. So I think that's why it's up across the state.
Okay, then, that makes a lot of sense. Then my question is, and this may be hard to answer, but just, could you give us a story of a typical elementary student who has special education, and sort of the time, how much time the teachers take with the students, and, just a few little details to put a human side to all
Sure.
of this?
Well, there's no typical. Every child is special and every child is unique in their needs. But if you look at a child that has a mild disability, let's just talk about maybe someone that is more a mild disability, that might have a learning disability in the area of reading. If that child is referred after having interventions done, we have 30 school days to do that evaluation. It takes about 8 hours per educator that's involved in that evaluation to complete that evaluation, write that report up, do all the testing with the child. You might see that child would receive daily 30 to 60 minutes a day of service, just that one child, from a reading specialist. If they have any other complex needs on top of that, where they need other services, maybe they need speech as well, that would be some additional time, maybe 20 minutes, 3 times a week, something like that. So that would be a very mild disability. If you're looking at our more severe, our students with more severe disabilities, we're looking at those students are receiving services the majority of their day, more than 60% of their day. So that's, of course, then there's a higher ratio of adults to students in those settings to do that.
So are the services generally one-on-one, or do they receive them as a group?
There's many services that they receive group services. We try to group as much as we can. There are certain times where speech might have to be individualized, or the service might have to be individualized for a specific reason, but we usually serve in groups.
Other questions? No?
I didn't realize when I was in graduate school for a short time how visionary my advisor said, who said, if you're going to teach industrial arts, consider special education.
Yes.
There's a real, so one of the things that I learned, and I think is true in my experiences, is that what needs to be done now. There's no delay, and delay is expensive just for a whole lot of reasons, and I'm not talking about the cost of a delay, I'm talking about the impact of a delay. So I would advise that we do as much as we possibly can to move this forward.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go back to Margaret.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cheryl, one of the options you mentioned about larger spaces, can you hear me? I'm sorry. Larger spaces to serve more students. Just from knowing you and working with you on SevSec, I know this is not a great idea for this population, correct?
Can you explain what you mean?
Putting
What's
more students.
into a space?
Yeah.
More students into small spaces is not a good idea.
Right.
Depending on the student needs, more students is not necessarily effective either.
Right.
It's that ratio of, that's a ratio of really what's effective for any students. The more behavior, you might have more behaviors coming about, kids getting overwhelmed. We're seeing more students needing more individualized space to go to work. So it's really individualizing that space as well to meet those needs.
Okay. And my other question, I'm hoping you can answer this quickly, and if not, we'll take it, you can email me or something. Can you talk to me about the difference between low incidence, neuro, biological, and ASD? Because they're all dealing with autism spectrum, correct?
Well, low incidence, there might be some students that have autism, but they usually have cognitive disabilities and physical disabilities that are very severe.
Okay.
They might have a congenital disorder, something like that, that's more significant. They typically might be in a wheelchair, have communication devices that they're using, and instead of being able to speak, they maybe not be able to feed themselves or walk by themselves, those kinds of things.
Okay.
So very significant needs. And then our neurobiological students, we call it the NB program because we don't just serve students on the autism spectrum in those programs.
Okay.
There could be other students that have neurobiological conditions that, say, like Tourette's, that might benefit from the strategies that are used in the autism classroom, more so than maybe in any other setting in our programs. So those specific strategies are what are used and highly researched in order to reach our students on the autism spectrum or with other neurobiological conditions.
Okay, so it's about what is being delivered and not
It
about
is.
the disorder necessarily.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Okay, and then
It's about
ASD
service.
is the autism spectrum.
Autism spectrum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Amy?
Do the students ever graduate out of your services? And if they do, sort of what percentage do you see move on?
I don't have a percentage off the top of my head, but I will share a story because I love that part. And it goes back to serving early childhood. And we know that early childhood services are really, really important, and that if we can catch the students early, we can hopefully graduate them from services later on or prevent them from needing more significant services later on. So we had a child recently who did graduate, and this child was with us from like 2 years old and had significant needs at that time, and was thought to be on the autism spectrum. And so, but with services and the intensity of services and things throughout, this year was actually exited from services.
How old?
I'm not going to say that, elementary age.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
It just can be too identifiable, so just trying to be careful.
Other questions? I had a couple. So you've laid out some different options that you're considering, and you've kind of really shared the case very well. What is the timing for sort of decision? Because it seems like the challenge of hiring special ed and like a .25 child psychologist, that those hiring needs, you're going to want to get out early. So I wondered about your decision.
Well, the psych piece, we've been able to shift for that. So there have been some changes with our school psych and the role that our school psych at early childhood is taking. And then we also had, with the cooperative, we were absorbing some of the staff that were hired, with us. And then we sold to the cooperative. We're just going to reabsorb them. So it actually works out really well.
And that's true for the FTEs as well, then?
The other FTEs?
Right.
For teacher time, not necessarily, no.
Okay,
And
so
that's
those
an
would be
issue.
hires.
We've had a lot of retirements this year. We have a lot of openings this year, and our pool is very thin.
So timing
concerning.
of coming to the board, and do you envision by the next meeting, we would be making a decision so that you
Yes.
can go forward with hiring?
Yes.
Great. And then my other question is, I didn't see any sort of transportation costs in here, but sometimes when we're looking at different sort of options and building constraints and I know that special ed has its own sort of challenges with transportation, is that going to be part of this, or?
Well, transportation is always part of the equation when you're serving special education students, so we're obligated to serve if that's the only way that they can access that service. We must serve. Transportation is also reimbursed 100%, but there is a cap to that as well. So, and many districts are reaching that cap.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? No?
I have one comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a caveat in the statute that you can lease for administrative space, as long as you can prove that it basically is reducing your cost to not lease instructional space. And there's several hoops we would have to jump through, but it is an option if that's where we need to go, so.
Okay, thank you. That's good news.
All right, Director Bailey, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, the opportunity to work with Cheryl in early childhood has made me very aware of the space and the need that she has for early childhood, or special ed there, and so I do know this issue that she's seeing quite firsthand in the early childhood, and know that that's just a continuation of what it looks like in the other buildings too.
Right.
Well, I appreciate such a thorough analysis of all the options that you're considering, and I'm with Noel, we need to move forward to do what we can, particularly because I know hiring will be a challenge, so thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, we are ready to move on to our second item for discussion and reports, the Internal Service Fund, and our Director, Val Mergestorff, will present that to us.
Good evening. So I am going to present the Internal Service Fund budget tonight. This is probably one of my favorite budgets to present, only because it's a really wonderful success story of some excellent collaboration throughout the district. So the Internal Service Fund is the fund that accounts for our self-insured health and dental plans. We have been self-insured with dental since fiscal year '06, and in fiscal year '12, we went self-insured with our health insurance. The revenue for the fund is the premiums that the district, the employees, and the retirees contribute, and the expenditures reflect actual claims paid, and then the administrative fees that both Blue Cross Blue Shield and Delta Dental charge for hosting our plans. And it is a separate fund that is presented separately in our financial statements. For dental, you may recall last year we had a significant increase in projected, and that was due to the fiscal host arrangement with the co-op. So we had projected about 40 additional people enrolling in the plan, and it ended up being about 37. And we are, the co-op will be hosting their own contracts next year, so those 37 will be coming off. So that's the decline in participation. If we compare 15-16 to 17-18, we're still seeing increased participation in just our district employees. The premiums, the Benefit Advisory Committee meets a couple times a year, and we review our claims data, and the dental, actually, the premiums have never been increased since 2006. We actually decreased them 50% for 2 years as kind of a premium holiday because we had enough fund balance that we could do that to help offset an increase that we were seeing on the health insurance side. And so this is, again, being held flat for the 11th year or something like that now for dental. For the financial summary, this is a pretty consistent from year to year. We have slight increase in participation. The costs typically go up slightly. You can see that everything's kind of coming down slightly due to the decrease with the subsec staff moving to their own contracts. So our goal with the dental fund is to maintain a minimum fund balance of $200,000. You can see I'm projecting that we will end at about $246,000, which is over our goal. And this fund's been incredibly stable the entire time that we've been self-insured. Our health participation is pretty much the same story, decline due to the subsec staff coming off, but if you compare 15-16 to what we're projecting for 17-18, it is still an increase of our district staff. Part of that is the ACA requirements. Part of that is when Post bought Maltameal, we had quite a few people transition because of the benefit changes there, where their spouses were carrying the coverage and now they are. So that's some of it as well. Again, the premiums, we are holding flat for the 5th year in a row, which is pretty remarkable in this current environment. You hear a lot of employers and school districts who are seeing double-digit increases in their health premiums. So we are very proud of the work that the Benefits Advisory Committee has done to help stabilize. That was the whole goal of the self-funded program, and it has been thus far incredibly successful. So for the financials, same thing. The numbers are coming down slightly due to the participation. Our claims data has been relatively consistent. We saw a slight uptick when we switched from Medica to Blue Cross, but not a significant change. We are projecting to end with $5.9 million in our fund balance at the end of next year, which, if you will look, is more than 1 year's worth of our total expenditures. That's a really great position to be in. We've had flat, no increases in our premiums. We got rid of the liability that the general fund had, and increased participation and our benefit options, actually. Having this type of fund balance really opens the door to conversations that the Benefit Advisory Committee can have about enhancing the plan and doing those sorts of things to help, because we have the ability to do that now without adversely impacting the employees. So that's an exciting place to be. So overall, I mean, really great stewardship. I would like to publicly thank Molly Wiesman. She has spearheaded the Benefits Advisory Committee and really has had a vision for what the benefits in the district can be. And she does an excellent job advocating for our staff. And so this is our success story of that. So any questions?
Board members, questions? No?
Can you explain a little bit of the administrative fees?
Yep, so Blue Cross Blue Shield is our provider, and so we are part of their network, and they charge us a fee per member, essentially, to be part of their self-insured plan, and it gives us access to their network and all those sorts of things. So it's kind of a per user fee that we pay on top of that. So does that make sense?
Makes sense, it just seems pretty pricey.
It's a smaller percentage. Yes, it's $1 million, but as in comparison to the total, our claims are the biggest driver of our expenditures. But it is expensive. We actually, because we've had good claims data, that price has actually come down since we initially went. The first year we went self-insured, they weren't necessarily sure how our claims would be, the type of population we had. And so as we've had good claim data, each time we've had to go out and bid that, we've gotten better results. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Other questions? Amy?
So for the administrative fee, they also process all the claims too?
Yes.
And then we just pay them, we pay Blue Cross Blue Shield the money for the claims?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, I'm just curious if someone was to have some sort of catastrophic illness that,
Yep.
is $1 million or $2 or something.
Yes.
How does that work with this whole plan?
It does not eat up all of our fund balance, though we do have a goal of $2 million minimum, just to make sure we can cover anything that might happen. But we do have what's called stop loss or reinsurance, where we are only responsible up to $100,000, I believe, per incident. So if somebody had a truly catastrophic, we would only be responsible for the first 100,000, and then the reinsurance would kick in after that and is basically paid by like an insurance company. We have had very few situations. We have, I would say on average, between 5 and 9 situations in a given year that exceed that, but none that have been really catastrophic. I think our largest has been like 150,000, at least that I can recall off the top of my head. And so that plays into our administrative fee. If we have lots of stop loss, then we also pay part of that administrative fee is our stop loss insurance. So as long as we haven't been exceeding that excessively, then that premium comes down as well. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Other questions?
Thank you. You guys are great.
My pleasure.
I was just going to say, if I could echo Val's words, that this is a great success story. This morning in a meeting I was in with community organizations that were all talking about 20% increases in their health insurance premiums for next year. So many, many thanks to Molly Wieselman and the Benefits Advisory Council for their work on this.
Yep, they do a great job.
Thank you,
All
Val.
right, thank you.
All right. Now we have Director Bailey coming up for our third item, which is Community Services Budget. And I'll remind board members that in your table file, there was just a correction to the projected revenue numbers.
All right, thank you for having me this evening for the Community Services Budget. This slide, of course, is just the reminder of the principles of community education, but I also wanted to give it an opportunity to highlight some of the share some of the highlights from fiscal year 2015-16. We had 40,732 children, youth, and adults participate in a community services program. We had just under 122,000 people that gained access to a school district facility through community services. This is nearly a 23,000% increase over the previous year. A lot of that is due to the political caucuses that took place last year. Those are always bring a lot of community members into the building. We also have a long-term rental agreement with a church that is seeing some growth in their membership as well. And then community services provided scholarships to 204 program participants in 32 different program areas last fiscal year. As also a reminder, these are some of the community services program components. One update to a program that is recognized here is Adult Basic Education. Claudia Kinville, who has been our Adult Basic Education Coordinator, is officially retiring here on June 1st. We have kind of coaxed her to not join the ranks of those that are retired for the last 2 years, as she's graciously continued to help us as we have searched for how best to fill her position. So I'm pleased to share that we have hired Dr. Tracy Craybaum as our new Adult Basic Education Coordinator. She will start her position next Monday, May 8th. She will be shared between the Lakeville and Dakota Prairie Adult Basic Education Consortium. And as a reminder, the Dakota Prairie is the consortium Northfield is a part of and also serves Farmington and Randolph. Again, more of our program components, and Cheryl certainly touched on our hand-in-hand preschool. This year, we are serving 136 students in our hand-in-hand preschool, both through special education and general education. Of those students, we have 11 who utilize Pathway 1 Early Learning Scholarships, 24 who utilize the Pathway 2 Early Learning Scholarship, and 12 who are on school readiness scholarships, for a total of 47 students of those 136 students who are receiving some sort of support. And we have 8 sections of preschool taking place this year. And at the Greenville Park Community School last year, 481 students participated in 890 hours of out-of-school time programming at the community school. And this was a 50 more students than participated last year. And it's almost every student at Greenville Park, as Mary can attest to the student count. These are the budget revisions that we're also including in this report tonight for this current fiscal year. These budget revisions will also be approved at the June board meeting. As you can see, we now know what our fund balance as of June 30th, 2016 was. We ended last fiscal year with a fund balance of $530,927. In the original budget that I shared with you, we were projecting a fund balance of just over $32,000. We are now, in our budget revisions, projecting a fund balance of just under $76,000, which would leave our projected total fund balance at the end of this fiscal year of $606,896. Some of the major factors contributing to the changes in revenues and expenditures for this current fiscal year: as you can see, we have continued to just kind of see steady increase in our participation in our school-age child care program, which is Kid Ventures. We saw a significant jump the year that all-day kindergarten was implemented, and so suddenly we had children that weren't needing care for half a day, but really could utilize the before and after school care. So saw a significant jump that year, and then since then have just steadily seen an increase of about 30 students or so a year, and that has again happened over last year. That has an increase in both in our revenues and expenditures. Of course, increase in fees generated by students, but also certainly have more staffing, food, supply costs that are incurred with that as well. We have also seen an increased participation in our health insurance. This is across many program areas, and I will say for some of our programs, the ability to have the position that they have in the school district that allows them to have health insurance is really the reason they're choosing to work here versus potentially another site within the community. So certainly a great benefit. And then we have increased students participating in Pathway 1 Early Learning Scholarships to attend in hand, which is a plus in our revenue column. They are able to access scholarships up to $7,500 a student, and it can again pay for their hand-in-hand preschool and any fees that go with that, whether it be snack, milk, transportation, field trips. It also then can cover any childcare needs that they may have too. So we've had some great increase in the access to that as well. Community Services has 2 budget goals that we're working towards this year. One is to have an overall fund balance that equals at least 2 months of the Community Services operating expenses. I can say with what we are projecting here would meet that goal. And the other is to increase the fund balance for the purpose of larger capital projects. As Cheryl highlighted well earlier tonight, we know that we have programs that have long waiting lists and are in spaces that need to be addressed. And so we are just looking, as we look forward to that and decisions continue to come down the future, we know we will likely need some funds available to address those issues. For those of you who potentially have been on the board for many years now, one of our reasons for the goal to have an operating to maintain 2 months worth of our operating revenue is because of how susceptible the community services budget is to economic conditions. If there is a downturn in the economy, people don't necessarily need childcare. They're not choosing to take some of the extra enrichment or class or recreation classes that they might take. And as you can see in this graph, years where the economy was worse, we certainly were not seeing the fund balance that we are seeing today. So this year, or FY18's budget assumptions are one, that we would be, for revenues, maintaining revenues for fee-based programs similar to the activity we are seeing this current year. So we would expect similar participation rates. We do know we will see a decrease in state aid for early childhood family education and school readiness next year. This is actually the dollars that are directly tied to our birth to 4 census. So Hazel Reinhardt, who did do the demographic study and predicted some slight decrease in population, we are actually seeing that in the birth to 4 population. It doesn't exactly play out in the enrollment reports that you will see, and part of that we know is some move-ins, but also some open enrollment. But when we do our birth to 4 census count, we are seeing some decrease still in population, which directly drives these dollars. Those census numbers directly drive these state aid dollars, so we know we'll see a slight decrease there. We also are assuming the continuation of Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 early learning scholarships, and if you've paid any attention to the governor's and House and Senate budgets that are out there, there's varying degrees of what will happen here. We are hopeful that we will continue to see these 2 funding sources. And then, of course, we have several grant applications that are out there at this time. And then assumptions in the expenditures, again, accounting for appropriate increases in salaries, wages, and insurance. The Community Services Division will continue the coverage of the $10,000 district partnership for funding to the Northfield Healthy Community Initiative. And then also assuming we will continue that increased participation in our health insurance by staff members of the Community Services Division. One thing that is just a budget neutral and wanted to at least call your attention to it, for many years, the Community Services Division has been the fiscal host for the staff of the Rice County Family Services Collaborative. The 2 staff that were part of the collaborative, one has retired and one has taken another position, and we have gone to a contract model with another agency for that work. So it's revenue neutral, just not something that is an in and out of the Community Services budget in this future year. To recognize what are the revenue sources for the Community Services Division, 28% of our budget is state aid and local levy dollars based on the formulas established by the Minnesota State Legislature. The largest percentage of our revenue sources, again, as I mentioned, are participation fees at 59%. And then, of course, as you can see, we have grants submitted, other local sources, and Pathway 1 and 2 early learning scholarships. Just so you are clear, those other local sources include our payment from the City of Northfield for the recreation programming that we administer for the city. It includes any sponsorships we have for typically Little League, baseball, softball, flag football programs, and then advertising that we receive for our community services brochure. If you've often noticed that the last 8 to 10 pages include community advertising, and that revenue is reflected here in other local sources. Here's again just a pie chart that recognizes how our revenue sources play out. So then for the community services budget for fiscal year 18, again, we are projecting that the fund balance as of June 30th of this current year will end up at $606,896. We are then next year projecting just a slight addition to the fund balance of $2,131 for a projected total fund balance at the end of next fiscal year of $609,027. I think I say every year that I actually feel that everything that Community Services does directly benefits the K-12 grades and then the district operations, but here, of course, are what I think people naturally think of or naturally see every day as kind of direct benefits to K-12 and district operations. And as you can see, this reflects 41% of the Community Services budget. Of course, there are some variables in the information I've just presented to you. One, actual program enrollments. We are, of course, not able to directly project those for next year. Fee collection, again, assuming that we have relatively timely receipt of any bills from all of the programs that we have put out there. And then, of course, grant funding. And then I do want to reflect on the Greenville Park Community School. This is a program that is run and operated out of the Community Services Division, but due to the fact that it is a federal grant, funds for the community school actually have to be part of the general fund or the 01 fund. The Community Services is the 04 fund. So these are not directly reflected this is not directly reflected in the budget that you just saw. As you can see, for our current fiscal year, we had just slightly over $142,000 is what the funding was for the Greenville Park Community School. The largest percentage being that from the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, contribution from the Northfield Public Schools, Northfield shares, a small grant from the Minnesota Alliance with Youth, and then some community donations and Wings contribution. For next year, our funding is a little bit more uncertain. We know we will have the contribution from the Northfield Public Schools. The 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, as you remember when we initially received this grant, it was a 5-year grant. They gave you the first 3 years up front, and as long as you were meeting your goals, you would be eligible for years 4 and 5. We have very successfully, as you'll see in these next couple of slides, met our goals for the first 3 years. There's been some uncertainty in 21st Century Community Learning Center funding at the federal level and where that funding will end up. It does look secure for next year, and I'm just saying it's not secured yet because the grant hasn't been released. So we know we need to apply for those funds. We would anticipate they would be roughly in that $94,000 a year again, but they are not secured yet as that grant has not been released from the state of Minnesota. So what our targets were that actually drive us being eligible for the funding is when we initially wrote the grant, we needed to set attendance targets. And what the state is really interested is in duration. And so they're really interested in the dosage and duration. And so that you are attending the program, what they are most interested in is those who attend 30 plus times. And so this graph actually reflects at the elementary level. So our goal for the Minnesota Department of Education was that we needed 288 students to be part of the program. And the salmon colored bar, everybody to the right is who is considered part of the program. If you come to the community school for 5 times, the first 5 times we count it as trying it out, and that once you've come that 6th time, then we count you as actually being part of the program. And so we are actually at a total participation of 486 students. So we have happily met that goal. And then high school attendance also reflects another, this is middle school and high school attendance. Again, most of these students would be Greenville alumni or now living in the Greenville boundaries. So again, those MDE attendance targets, the goal set by MDE is that we would have 175 Greenville Park students take place in the activity. Again, and those would be counting 6 and more. We've had 288 Greenville Park with a total of 382 when you count the middle school and high school. 130 students needed to attend 30 plus times. Again, as you can see, we've had 136 Greenville Park and 177 total with high school and middle school. And then again, the reflection of how many were grade 5 and older. What is actually the most exciting is we actually reached our attendance goals on February 15th. And we were really excited last year when we hit them in the middle of March. And so it's really, what has been exciting to see is that each year we've actually reached our attendance goals slightly earlier. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
All right, board members, questions or comments? I have a couple while board members are thinking. I was just going to comment on your first half of your presentation and the fund balance and what a great, story that has been to see. And you attribute it to, of course, the economy is better, but I would say that your quality programs are also something that you should be really proud of. And I know how much work you've put into it, and Hannah before you, so I think certainly the economy has a role, but those quality programs are so.
Thank you, and I will certainly share that with all of the coordinators who are running the programs.
Other comments, Margaret?
I agree. I was going to say, this is a great report, and a lot of the success is the people behind it.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of that old line, if you build it, they will come. And you guys have an excellent program, and the participation shows that.
Thank you.
Noel?
It's clear that you touch a lot of people's lives, and thank you.
No, thank you.
Jeff?
Thanks for your work, and watching you over the years. I'm just proud of you and how you evolved into a good leader, and just keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Amy?
I know I've said this to you directly, Erin, but I just have to say it for the camera. I am so impressed by the scope of what you do in your office and all of the different areas that you oversee and all of the things that you take care of and all the people you work with. And I agree with the quality of the programs you're producing. And I just wanted to thank you for that and say I'm so glad that you're part of this district.
Thank you.
So I had one last comment, and that was in the second half of your report, you talked about the community school, and I don't know if others saw in the Star Tribune, there was an op-ed piece this morning where someone was talking about their struggles with tutoring students up in the Twin Cities, and then and what it took to help with the opportunity gap, and that in the end it was involving the parents and the family members in the school, and I just thought about what you haven't shared those numbers, but
That's
I know
true.
we've seen them before, and it's really impressive.
Yes, and I don't have them right off the top of my head, but we, of course, have each year done a report to the community, which I will share with you. I've left for each of you at a board meeting. That report has always reflected the parent involvement as well. I could look it up and email it to you tomorrow. But it is a significant number of parents who are also at the community school each night. We track that just like we track everything else. It's not something we have to report to the Minnesota Department of Education as part of our grant funding, but it has been probably one of the largest pieces in terms of impact out of the community school. I think as far as the culture that has been built at Greenville and how comfortable parents feel there and day and night.
That was in this morning's.
Yeah, so this morning Star Tribune, if you look, there's an op-ed where someone talks about, and the conclusion was, basically, they needed our community school. So I was thinking about you and your presentation.
And we do actually have parents that come into this school too, for adult basic education classes on Monday and Wednesday mornings too, and I think they also feel like it's their building for school too.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So we are ready to move on to our first item for individual action. Board members, we had already the reading for the wellness policy, so you'll see it is now as an individual action. So Dr. Bailey, I don't know, or Dr. Bailey, Director Bailey, we're jumping the gun a little bit. Director Bailey, do you have?
Sit in the chair, you get the
I was gonna say, it's a different level, I think.
Do you want to say a few words before we have a
Sure.
motion?
So this is certainly the work that Stephanie Strummy, our Child Nutrition Director, presented at the last board meeting, and she and the District Advisory Council have certainly put a lot of work into this. It has, of course, been driven by some of the federal requirements, but I think Stephanie has done a great job of working with many partners, as you know, and was talked about at the last meeting. It's going to have an impact across staff, parents, and children, and so the work she has really put in to making this a smooth transition has been greatly appreciated.
So board members, I would ask for a motion before we have any sort of discussion on this item for individual action.
I'll move.
Margaret, so you're moving the,
I will move that we approve the revised school board policy 533, wellness.
great. Is there a second? Second by Amy? All right. Questions or comments? I know we have discussed it a little bit, but Amy?
I just want to say that I'm actually very excited about this new policy with the rise of obesity in our society, and I really like the various components of it. I think we'll have to re-educate the parents and other people a bit, but I think we'll be able to get everyone on board when they see that it's good for all the kids. And I'm just thankful for this new policy.
All right. Other comments or questions? So I guess I would echo that, all the work that Stephanie has done in pulling this together. And one thing, Director Bailey and I have chatted before the board meeting of how much this has been in the news, and I think that's a good thing because it won't, it'll help our own communications of the policy, the fact that there's been discussion of is the federal, situation going to stay the same, but I think that the work that you've done has been great, Stephanie, and I guess look forward to hearing how it rolls out. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, I would ask for the question. So all those in favor of approving this motion for the revised school board policy 533 wellness, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. We are ready to move on to the consent grouping. I will remind board members that we had some personnel items. In addition, there was the district youth council membership was in your table file as being part of the consent grouping, as well as a gift agreement. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Amy, seconded by Jeff. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The consent grouping is approved. Enrollment report is under items for information.
Yes, so the enrollment report is at the end of your packet. The only thing that would be a slight change that, and of course this has been talked about in the previous board meetings, and as you can see at the bottom, this actual enrollment number at the bottom is the full-time only. So it is excluding early childhood and part-time ALC students. So in past counts where you saw that number and it was slightly over the 4,000 students, this has now subtracted those to reflect as accurate of a number as we can include for you. So that is why you also are seeing what looks like a slight dip. It's not really a slight dip, but looks like that from the 4,000 plus enrollment number you had seen.
Great. Any questions on that? All right. Our second item for information is a reminder that following the Monday, May 22nd school board meeting, we'll have a closed negotiation strategy session immediately following the board meeting. All right. And then we have some reminders for future meetings. Our next meeting is Monday, May 22nd, followed by the closed negotiations. We have the only meeting in June is June 12th, and I would also remind board members about the ALC and the high school commencements that are coming up. I think we typically get an invitation from the ALC. I believe it's Friday night this year. So
This Friday night?
no. It's June. Yes, Friday, June 2nd. It's in the evening at the high school. 7 p.m. And then the high school commencement will be Sunday, June 4th, and we usually get 2 p.m. We usually meet at around 1:30 in the office. So those come up before our June 12th meeting, and of course, we'll have reminders again in May about those. So with that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Margaret, seconded by Amy. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.